Tim, good after. I almost did it. Good morning. How are you?
Well, good morning to you, brother. Actually, it's afternoon in the free town of Knoxville.
The swampy swamp, right? I don't, they say not to ask questions that you don't at least have an idea of the answer, but I'm going to do that because I think I know probably where you were on this yesterday, but I've not seen the votes. I know that this proposal yesterday, the anti-discrimination bill, the anti-Semitism bill, the legislation that passed that would establish a broader definition of anti-Semitism, passed 320 to 91. Where were you on that?
Well, believe it or not, I voted for it, and I'll tell you why. Because I felt like it was important to send a message that this country would not stand for anti-Semitism, that we would stand with these Jewish folks. I guess we're just kind of covered up with it. In Washington, at George Washington University, for instance, the president of the university, now this isn't going to be some moderate or conservative by any stretch of the imagination, has called on the city of Washington to provide law enforcement because the Jewish kids on this campus weren't safe. And the mayor of Washington, D.C. turned them down flat out, said, no, we're not going to do it.
Yeah, we had that story yesterday. Didn't the mayor say that it would be bad publicity or something or another?
Yeah, well, she's bad publicity in herself. If you remember the day we had a hearing on the crime in Washington, D.C., where they sent, I think it was 5 white men up there to talk to us, and I actually chastised them. I said, this is a predominantly black town, and you're sending white people here. And Quasi Mafumi, who is a black man, former head of the NAACP, now in Congress, he actually stopped me in the hall and thanked me for asking that question, because it was just, Washington, D.C. is in a total state of denial. And the day that we had the hearing, if you remember, there was somebody carjacked in broad daylight while we were having the hearing in one of the nicer areas. So Washington, D.C. is a disaster, but it is really a microcosm of the rest of this dadgum country. These colleges have allowed this hate speech that is, it's to the point of where they're calling for the death of Jews, and it's being enforced in the classroom. Now, we've got to take a stand on it, and I don't, and I've talked. We had a constitutional lawyer on the House floor talking to us about it, and that he felt like it passed constitutional muster. And there's other interpretations. I don't. It is really, it's pretty much non-binding what was written. So I held my nose and I voted for it, because I think it's that important that we.
Well, my concern is that it does not distinguish. And look, friends can disagree on this matter, and I'm not going to turn you into an enemy because we might disagree on your vote. That said, my concern is that it does not make the clear distinction between those expressing themselves through speech and those acting in a manner which directly intimidates or threatens other people, regardless of why they're being threatened or intimidated. And I just think that this goes a step too far toward some sort of national standard outlawing hate speech. I think we need to protect that speech which is unpopular, even if it's disgusting and repugnant. I think you answer bad speech with more speech, not less.
Yeah, I don't argue with you, and I'm not disagreeing with you on that. I just felt when I read it, of course, I'm not an attorney, and that hinders me a lot of times with this stuff when they start talking back and forth. We had attorneys on the floor going back and forth, and they would change their opinion of it, and then they would go back the other direction. So I voted for it. It passed. I doubt it will pass in that form in the Senate. If it does pass at all, it is not, it's non-binding from what I understood. So we'll see what happens with it, but we're a long ways off from it doing anything. And of course, if you're worried about enforcement, there is no enforcement anymore at the federal level of anything. We've got we've got a gutless Republican Party, a Marxist Democrat Party, and the people that write the big checks seem to be the ones that win because you can't get, case in point. I had this legislation last year about the Antifa crowd wearing their mask, their COVID mask to hide their identity when they were committing crimes, and I tried to get an enhancement. It didn't go anywhere with the Democrats, and it probably won't go anywhere with the Republicans. And the main reason is there's no dollars behind it. Both parties.
I'm told by the powers that be, your handlers, that you've got a hard out in like 2 minutes, and so I want to abide by that. But I want to get to the CIA front. I know that you're concerned about CIA actions during Trump. Before I do you think Marjorie Taylor Greene is serious with regard to the motion to vacate, and do you think this will happen? If so,
well, actually, she just sent me a text and wanted to sign on my letter on the OAN situation where the Democrats are trying to knock a conservative television show off the air. Yeah, she's serious. She's a serious lady. And but I don't think the votes are there. I'm afraid if we do this, it will hand the gavel to the Democrats, or, as I've said, Hakeem Jeffries light. It would either be Hakeem Jeffries or one of his lieutenants that considered to be a moderate, because we've got Republicans in districts where Biden won by 15 points. So, I think she's serious, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
With regard to OAN, I mean, and obviously I fully support your defense of news organizations presenting the news, even if they're presenting the news in a particular fashion. I mean, I defend MSNBC all the time, and I hate what they have to say on MSNBC because I believe in a robust, free press. Walk me through the assaults on this, and if you can, in combination, because I got to go quick. The CIA deal, apparently you're uncovering, Tim, where the CIA is actively admitting that they did not inform the president of the United States about certain matters that they were undertaking. Is that right?
Yeah, so it was an undercover reporter, and I've got the guy on tape, a CIA, I believe he's a director, and lo and behold, they called the CIA to ask about him. They said, well, he no longer works here, and so nobody knows where he is or what he's doing. But, yeah, they were not briefing Trump when he was a candidate, and then they would not disclose information to him when he was president. So it was, it's the shadow government. We talk about that all the time, but that's why you've got to have, if he wins this next time, he needs to knock about a third out of a lot of those alphabet agencies and put people in that are loyal to this country, because it is a tail wagging the dog. We've got people that are corrupted and compromised, and they are running the show. And that's why things like the FISA warrants are so important to them. If they could violate the Constitution, that's spy on Americans, because that keeps them in power.
Congressman Burchett, if it were you telling me that you had to go, I would keep you on for the next 5 or 10 minutes. But Rachel says you have to go, so she's very important. So I will say goodbye. We'll suspend it until next time, and we'll talk again very soon.
Thanks, brother. Pray for our country, and please vote.
Amen. On both fronts. There's Congressman Tim Burchett. I knew he had a hard out, and I only extended him by an extra minute or so. Completely disagree with his vote on the bill regarding anti-Semitism and the changing of the definition. But I want to demonstrate to you how friends can disagree on things, remain friends. I could have bogged down with him, and I don't want to do that. I like Tim. I think he's a good guy. He immediately, after saying that he voted in favor of the legislation, started saying how he didn't believe the legislation would do anything or that it wouldn't pass the Senate. So he understands that it is a step. I just consider it a step too far. You will find no better friend of the Jewish people than Matt Murphy. You will find no stronger stand against ridiculous, nonsensical, gross, disgusting hate speech than Matt Murphy. I am here to tell you that you do not want a country that begins picking and choosing that speech which we will allow and that speech which we will not, absent real and present danger against individuals or groups. Now, obviously, we set certain guardrails, certain parameters, but we must defend those guardrails regularly by insisting that there are real and present dangers to individuals involved in the limitation of speech, i.e., screaming fire in a crowded theater where there is no fire. Right? You're allowed to do that. You know, most people get this wrong. Well, Matt, you can't scream fire in a crowded theater. Yes, you can. You have to suffer the consequences if there's actually no fire. If there's a fire, everybody's going to laud you as a hero. But if there is no fire, you have to accept the consequences of putting individual people and groups of people in harm's way. Similarly, if I tell you on the radio that there's a fire and there's a fire, I suffer no consequences. But if I incite you to action in a way that might put people in danger on radio or on the public square or anywhere, then I have to suffer the consequences. Hate speech is a phrase that is made up in order to marginalize individuals who say things that most of us disagree with. What good is our First Amendment if it is not there to protect those that say disgusting things? Let me say it again. What good is the First Amendment if it is not there to protect people that we all find disgusting or that we believe hold disturbing views? The First Amendment is useless if it is only used to defend the prevailing view. It is there to make sure that dissenting views are allowed to be heard as well. Even if they're disgusting, even if we hate them, even if it just makes us sick to our stomachs, we still must defend the right of the individual to say them. And this legislation, Tim can say that it doesn't really do anything. But I'm looking at it, and it does a few things. It disallows, ultimately, it disallows criticism of the state of Israel. It makes it illegal to deny the Holocaust. Now, that's a tricky one, but walk with me here. Understand something. I'm not defending any of these viewpoints. I'm not defending any one of these people. But if we live in a country that we can make it illegal to think certain things and say those certain things out loud, it may not be you today or tomorrow or next week, but eventually they'll come for you too. Eventually you will say something the government doesn't like. And if you give the government that level of power, I promise you they'll use it. Let us not allow the emotions of the moment to cloud our vision and our clarity about what we are as a nation. Let us not allow the emotions of the moment to cloud our vision about what it is to be an American.